Welcome to a special edition of Best Ball. We're talking playoff best ball. We are only a week and a half until the playoffs actually begin. And these final 10 days or so, these are prime time playoff best ball drafting. We have a general idea. We know the one seed in the AFC. We're down to two teams in the NFC. We pretty much know most of the playoff teams. A lot of information out there. A lot of, a great time really just to be drafting because we got that information. We can get a little crazy and go for the one seeds, figure out those buys. Today, though, we're going to have some fun. We'll draft some underdog. We'll draft an underdog playoff best ball. We'll do a DraftKings playoff best ball too. I'll talk through some of the tools that I'm using as well. And hopefully just my thought process as we're making these picks can help you guys as you are doing your drafts as well. So let's start it off. Let's just jump right in to we're going to go for the big deal. We're going for the gauntlet. We got $2 million in prizes. I think it's $200K up top right there. These are filling pretty quickly. If we look at, let's go back to the drafts. You can see for the gauntlet, where are we? There it is. We are about 40% filled right now. I have high confidence this will fill before the playoffs. This is kind of the time of year when we're hitting it hardest. If you are looking for a strategy breakdown, you can listen to the podcast that we did in the Establish the Run podcast feed with myself, Adam Levitan, and Sam Brock, kind of talking strategy from a 101 angle and then getting a little more detailed, a little more in depth on some really strategy components, even some team takes. But as you see, hey, name of the game for best ball, for playoff best ball, is you've got to advance each individual round. So for this structure, when you want to finish 2 out of 6 for the wild card round, then 1 out of 10 for both divisional and conference championship, and then a 300-seat final. So yes, we are building teams that are going to be live in the final. That is our goal. We have 3 out of 6, so we'll get that going. As this continues to fill, usually my process for before I enter drafts is I head on over to the best ball rankings. I take the latest CSV and I upload them on to the Underdog site. These rankings are updated every couple days, really, particularly when we have either major injury news or when there's games that have been played. So the odds are shifting. Because as you can see with the rankings, we have what are their playoff odds for the majority of teams. It's 100%. You scroll down, you get a Tampa. They're at 93%. I think they're double 2 touchdown favorites against New Orleans this week. If they win that game, they then win the division. I think you have the Broncos as well at 86% down here. Those are the spots that are really still remaining. If we look at, I think you've got the really, really long shots. But as you can see, the rankings, this is mostly assuming that the Bucks and Broncos get those last spots. And it's particularly interesting because for the Bucks, like while they're still fighting for it, they're not just fighting. I mean, if they get in, they're winning the division. And then with that winning the division, they're getting that home game. And that could be the 3 seed. It could be the 4 seed, depending on what happens with the Rams. Lots to kind of consider, but those are the implications as we think through best ball, because if they get the 3 seed, then we may not want to stack them with the Eagles. But if they end up in the 4 seed, now you're more likely to stack them with the Eagles because those two can continue to play in the wild card round and the divisional round and still meet in the conference championship. And we want to keep as many players live throughout the entire playoffs so we can continue to advance in those more difficult 1 out of 10 divisional, 1 out of 10 conference championship rounds. As you will see as well, as once this draft starts, we have the Solver draft assistant tool as well live. So I've got it kind of going in the background right now, but you can see the Solver draft assistant here. And what that's showing us is a lot of just the key information that'll make this draft a little easier. So we've got the playoff percentages. We have, you can see as well, we've got, these are the ETR rankings that are kind of built in. Super Bowl chance right here. What are their odds to make the Super Bowl? We don't really care about winning. We just care about making it because that's where you get the live teams to the finals. And we have what their expected games number are according to a combination of kind of our own internal analysis, some of the Vegas odds, some of the other kind of models out there. So hopefully this can kind of help you. The other is you can see my specific exposure to these players. Actually, I need to do an upload. So to get this exposure, you need to upload your exposure into the Solver Assistant. I haven't done that in a while, so these are probably up. bit inaccurate from an exposure because I think I only did it after a couple drafts just to test it, but it's a helpful thing as well. And we can talk through some other tools to help you kind of track. So at this spot, we're going to have to grab a QB because the chance of them coming back to us is very slim. We have both Goff and Mahomes available. I think we're going to let's go with an Amon-Ra. Amon-Ra and Goff is the easy choice. You could get a little crazy. We could go Barkley and Mahomes. Nah, we're going to go Amon-Ra Goff. We're just going to play a bit more simple, a bit more chalky. It leaves us also some options. So my thought process there when trying to decide between. So if you go with the Detroit one, it's the easy. We're making a bet on one team. You've got your QB, you've got their stud wide receiver, and we'll let the draft kind of play out on its own for how do we want to attack the AFC, and we're not locked into anything. The other argument there was we could say, you know what? Let's go for Saquon and Mahomes. And in that Saquon Mahomes world, we are now pretty much locked into playing for that Kansas City Philly Super Bowl, which, hey, that's a 1 seed and a 2 seed. And it's a decent kind of decent likelihood of it happening. Yeah, it's not great that like such early in the draft you're locking yourself into a Super Bowl matchup, but Mahomes and Barkley is going to be a much lower owned combination than Jared Goff and Amon-Ra. And so if we do get to the Super Bowl with this team, assuming the Lions get the 1 seed, yes, it will be, depending on who they play in the AFC, it's going to be hard to get Lions to the Super Bowl. But if you get the path there, Goff and Amon-Ra is going to be a common pairing. So maybe there is. But if you get the Kansas City and the Eagles to the Super Bowl, having that Mahomes Barkley, that's going to be more unique. You'll probably see Barkley pair it a bit more with maybe the Jalen Hurts if the AJ Brown doesn't really do that combo. But I don't know. I think I like the Goff one. And at the end of the day, you do have a decent amount of Barkley and Mahomes because if you go Barkley in the first round, a lot of the other QBs end up getting taken. You're not going to get Josh Allen. You're probably not getting a Lamar. So you end up still getting that Mahomes-Barkley combo. So it may not be as rare as other AFC, NFC one-off from each team in the first 2 rounds. So we'll take Detroit. At this point, I'm also going to just start throwing the Lions in the queue here just for us to be able to easily track because I know that I want to be having a good amount of Lions in this team. Looking at the AFC, we've got some options here. We could go with the Buffalo, but if we go Buffalo, it's, you don't have the James Cook. You're missing out a little. We can get a little crazy and say, hey, let's try to build for a KC Detroit game. I think that sounds pretty fun. This is the time of year when I really want to be attacking for the likely 2 1 seeds, KC and Detroit, because majority of teams that were building for these two probably were doing it suboptimally over the past 3-4 weeks, and not to their own fault, but you just didn't have the full information of who were the other teams available. Maybe you were trying to grab some Seahawks. Maybe you were getting a little crazy with Bengals. Maybe you had some Cardinals, maybe Falcons. Here at this point in the year, we know that the Bucks, as long as they beat the Saints, they're 93%, they're going to make the playoffs. We know that the Rams are in the playoffs. And so that level of information will help us when we're trying to advance a very difficult 2-1 seed team. And just to take it to a higher level, but assuming Detroit gets the bye, we know Kansas City's getting the bye. We've got 4 guys who are going to be a 0 in the first round for the wild card. At most, we can take 1 more from Detroit or Kansas City because then all 5 of our other players we will need to be counting in that wild card round just to advance. So I will still keep an eye on some of these other Chiefs players. One of the nice things about the Chiefs is that, there's pretty strong depth there. They spread it out so much, so even their elite guys aren't that valuable. So if we want to wait, we can probably still grab Hopkins often falls, Noah Gray, maybe even Kareem Hunt. We still need a running back. So for this matchup, like, we definitely want it to be probably Dave Montgomery or Kareem Hunt, because we're thinking when the Super Bowl comes, this is what our lineup is going to be. It's going to be Jared Goff. It's going to be Amon-Ra, Xavier Worthy-Salem, Florida, and one running back. So we'll figure out, oh, there goes Dave Montgomery. We're going to hope that Kareem Hunt falls to us. Otherwise, we are in a difficult situation for the Super Bowl, and we may actually not even take a running back and just increase our chance of advancing past the first round. We could also say, you know what? We've got Amari Cooper here. We could go Keon Coleman. We can maybe turn this into a little more also of a Detroit Buffalo team. That's where we need to remain flexible as the draft happens. I'll go to the draft board here so we can see what's happening. He does have KC here. He goes Hollywood Brown. That's fine. Okay. We got the Kareem Hunt to fall to us. That's big. We've got to take him. And now after this, it's really how do we build it for enough points to kind of survive the early rounds. We've got Puka here, which I really like. Trying to think if there's any argument for that we can wait on someone like Kareem Hunt to further, strengthen our early, but I think we have to take Kareem Hunt just for that Super Bowl of, hey, we want to have 5 players and there's no other really Chiefs or Lions running backs available. Let's grab Puka. With the Puka, we're saying, pretty much just one of the highest upside players in the wildcard round, going to be playing at home in their first game. And let's see who else from the Rams is still available. Kyron's already went, so we're not going to be able to get that. We'll still need a very, strong running back. Could go Stafford for that stack, but given we're looking for high upside, I'm going to throw some of these commanders in. It's tough because we have the Detroit guys, and theoretically we're like, you know what? I'd like to pick players from the AFC instead of the NFC just to give me more optionality for that Super Bowl. But there's just a lot stronger and more, we're expecting higher scoring, more shootout games in the NFC. And we've kind of just said, you know what, with this build, we're putting all of our eggs in the Detroit, Kansas City Super Bowl bucket. Obviously, if Detroit ends up losing to Minnesota and Detroit doesn't get the bye, now this team has a lot better chance of advancing, but also it's no longer now as unique or, the upside's not as great because you're going to have a whole bunch of Detroit teams that are advancing because they get to play in that wild card round. So I'm going to think through, like, yes, someone like Nico, like Mixon are definitely solid plays. Mixon might be the best available, probably the best available running on the board. J.K. Dobbins isn't a bad one either. And yeah, it's nice to get those from the AFC. From a QB, while I do like Jaden and we know how much, just fantasy goodness as upside from the rushing can give us, I'm usually not hard pressed to kind of grab one ahead of some of these other more. There goes Nico. That would have been nice, but that was a stretch. He was already kind of way past ADP. But the difference between Jaden and some of these others just isn't that large from a QB perspective. While when you compare Joe Mixon, J.K. Dobbins to if we had to go with a Ray Davis, Justice Hill, Brian Robinson for that week 1, like it's a little more rough. But I'm still going to hold it here. It's a possibility. He himself can really help us kind of survive the large, high-scoring wild card rounds of a Josh Allen, of a Jalen Hurts, and so forth. All right, so we've got Puka. I'm more at this point when I'm looking for these kind of one-offs to help us advance. I'm focusing a little more on the running back position at this point in drafts because it really dies off. While wide receiver, even late in drafts, you can still often get a Cortland Sutton, a Romeo Dobbs. All right, one more pick here until it's back to us. We will be grabbing Dobbins if he falls. Dobbins looked really good in his first week back as he gets, okay, I like that. We have Dobbins. Now I'm trying to decide, do we take the Jaden Daniels, maybe instead go George Pickens and build for a little more. Okay. I think I accidentally muted myself. A little technical difficulty there. But yes, was between kind of But that J.K. Dobbins, Jaden Daniels pick could have gone with Jaden Reed, which would have left us another Jordan Love later on. But Jordan Love just hasn't been throwing nearly enough. If you look at his game log breakdown, even in the games where like they're higher scoring, they're just using a lot of Josh Jacobs. I guess you could make the argument that if it's a game like, against Tampa, that they need to throw more. But I think the gap between Jaden Daniels and Jordan Love is quite large. And hey, there's still a chance that like Terry McLaurin can fall back to us to give us that additional stack. So what we're looking at right now is we know we're playing for that Super Bowl at Detroit, Kansas City. We know that so many of the Detroit, Kansas City, where you've got 5 of those, are going to die in the first round, and they're going to be very difficult to get through. But in the times that you can get them through, if you can get that to the Super Bowl, and those are the teams playing in the Super Bowl, there could be so few teams that actually have a full team. And so when you're looking for that high upside, you're playing against 300 people and first prize is $200K, you're setting yourself for a decent shot at it. In this scenario, we got, Goff, Kareem, Amon-Ra, Xavier Worthy, Sam Laporta in the Super Bowl matchup. Now I'm just trying to figure out how can I get out of the first round and maybe give myself a little bonus as well of those players playing hopefully in the second round. So I still want to get some correlation aspects, not just completely throw things out the window and grab just random one-offs. So I'm going to have Terry for the stack of Jaden Daniels if he is available. Running back at this point is quite... Bucky is still available. Let's see what we have from an Evans standpoint as well. Mike Evans did go. There goes Bucky too. Okay, I was expecting that Bucky had already gone. So we've got Terry McLaurin as his possibility. We're 2 picks away. If we don't get Terry, I'll throw George Pickens in here as well. That gives us another AFC kind of team that I'd say has a decent chance. What is expected games is 1.55, so pretty solid chance of winning first game. We've got Terry McLaurin at 1.59. Okay. If they're both available to us, we're definitely grabbing Terry because the correlation with the Washington here, I think a fairly strong argument for us to grab both of them. So I'm going to let the time go because we're definitely going to go with the Terry McLaurin for the Jaden Daniels. Do we want to just be reliant just upon J.K. Dobbins on the other side? Challenges, what else would be? We could throw Brian Robinson in there as well and just kind of continue further with this correlation. I know Brian Robinson just hasn't played so much. They use Chris Rodriguez a bit more. This is an example where it's like, do I go for George Pickens? Probably has a bit higher projection. But Brian Robinson, and we're going with Jaden. We already have so much invested in this Washington. And yes, getting out of the first round is difficult, but we still want to also have teams that are live. I think I'm going to go with Brian Robinson here and really just invest in Washington. And, you can make an argument that like, okay, we also have a Washington, Kansas City Super Bowl possibility with Jaden, Brian Robinson, Terry McLaurin. I think those are the 3 kind of clear, most valuable Washington players. And on the other side, if it's Kansas City, you have Kareem Hunt and Xavier Worthy. Now, I don't really value that so much because most likely if Kansas City and Washington actually end up playing, there's going to be far stronger teams because there's teams that, hey, started with Kansas City, and then went with Washington, probably another NFC team. But it still is, it's worth including that in your EV calculations because Kansas City is the 1 seed and there's just not going to be that many Kansas City strong teams in the Super Bowl. Let's go back and we can kind of take a look at what other people were doing in this draft. We've got another former BBM winner in here, Daily Rojo. That was right next to us. So if you look at Daily Rojo's team, start off the Detroit, Kansas City. So very similar to what we ended up going with, but he's, first 2 rounds grabbed him. He then veered to go with some stronger kind of wild card pieces as well. Early with Josh Jacobs and Aaron Jones, he went for that more get that early running back talent because he knows he's probably not getting any Gibbs value in the first round. He's likely playing as if like Detroit was getting the bye. If we then look at his wide receivers, he got that 3rd piece for the Kansas City Detroit Super Bowl, grabbed a strong one-off in Ladd McConkey, grabbed the 4th piece in the Kansas City and the 5th piece in the Kansas City. So even right next to each other, we're both kind of playing for that Kansas City Detroit Super Bowl. It actually kind of helps us because now for each of us, we each have one fewer strong team in the wild card to have to kind of beat. Maybe that makes the other teams a lot stronger. And together we kind of, hurt ourselves, but we're playing for, hey, that rare outcome. I think the bigger difference between our teams is for him, he veered early to get some strong pieces in Josh Jacobs, Aaron Jones. Ladd McConkey's a great one-off too. I went with 4 straight of the Detroit, Kansas City. So if my team were to make the Super Bowl, it's a lot stronger than his. But if you were to do projections for the wild card round, he's got a lot better chance at advancing in this first round than we do. So we'll see how it plays out. But I think that's kind of a fun draft to show the difficulty of when you're going after the 2-1, likely 1 seeds, and what you got to kind of do to maneuver your way across. Okay. So that was it for an underdog. Hopefully that's helpful. Hopefully it's enjoyable. I mentioned the rankings. One other thing as well is for ETR subscribers, you can see we have an article for both Underdog and DraftKings that kind of just details a bit more strategy aspects, what you can be thinking about through these tournaments. I think those will be helpful. Also want to show this. So for Best Ball Explorer, I've been using this more recently where you can actually, to a way to kind of understand where I have maybe gaps in the teams that I want to build. So earlier I was looking at Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown teams. Here, let's do Goff and Amon-Ra. So with the Best Ball Explorer, a lot of you are probably familiar with this for regular season. They've now added features for playoff best ball. So you can go and upload your exposures for playoff best ball. In this scenario here, we can see, okay, I've got 5 drafts that have Jared Goff and Amon-Ra. I've been stacking with Houston pretty often. I've been stacking with Buffalo pretty often. So haven't done much of the Detroit, or really any of the Detroit, Kansas City. Let's see if this is all the contests. Yeah, so that right there, I probably need to go do a new upload this to get some more, but in general, it's showing like, hey, I don't have much of the Detroit, Kansas City. If we look to see what I'm mostly stacking Kansas City with, we can type in Mahomes. Yeah, most of my Mahomes just shows like, okay, I'm obviously stacking Kansas City. Here, I've got a lot of Kansas City and Philly ones. Got some Kansas City, Tampa. Okay, so I do have some Kansas City, Detroit teams, but as you can see, most of my Kansas City, Detroit teams are going Mahomes, not Goff. If we look, just Goff. And let's see. So once I have Goff, I have no Kansas City. So that was the first one there. Most of my Kansas City Detroits have been on that Kansas City side first and then Detroit. So that's good for me to be able to keep in mind. Okay, I need to build out some more of those to get some additional exposure because come Super Bowl, I don't want to only have just Mahomes ones, especially when Goff is probably actually has higher upside in a Super Bowl against Kansas City. But fun tool to play around. You can see you can overall like just go through, see all your teams, see your ADP, see what kind of draft capital you've been getting versus closing line. A lot of these were drafted a while ago, and you can see, hey, let's see what like this team is because it has such negative draft capital. My guess is I drafted on teams that aren't even going to be in the playoffs. Or I just went pretty hung. Interesting. I'll have to look more into this to figure out. But yeah, I went Mahomes number 4. So obviously some loss there from a Kansas City 16, a bit earlier than the kind of closing on value stuff. But you can do this to analyze your team, see where you're maybe taking players too early, where you maybe are lacking from kind of stacks and such. All right. Now let's head on over to DraftKings and we'll do another one here. Okay. Same idea for DraftKings with playoff best ball. We have rankings on the site. There's a strategy article there as well. I'll get the tournament started and then we can kind of talk through what this structure is. Because there are some slight differences between the Underdog and the DraftKings. Waiting for one more person, so it shouldn't be too long. I'll pull up the contest details. First off, $500,000 to first place, as you can see, meaning 25% of the prize pool is going to first place. Very, very top heavy, which should impact that we're really trying to draft for that Super Bowl. Big differences in this structure are instead of 2 of 6 advancing in the first round, 1 out of 6 are advancing in that first round. So it's that much harder to build to build teams that are using the 1 seeds. This doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it. It means that You got to do it strategically. Maybe, I don't know, you figure out what percent of your portfolio do you want to be going after those 1 seeds. And if it ends up being a Super Bowl of the 2 1 seeds, there's going to be very, very few teams that have a full team. You maybe don't even have that many teams that have, close to a full team. Other big difference here is tight end, where an underdog tight end is grouped in with wide receivers. On this site, tight end is its own spot. And so it's important to think through the various teams and kind of what role those tight ends play. If you're going to be going for Lions, Laporta's probably someone you really want to prioritize. If you're going to be going for the Bills, you could go Kincaid, you could go Dawson Knox. If you're going the Ravens, you could go Mark Andrews, you could go Isaiah Likely. Yes, we've seen Kincaid and Mark Andrews, have a larger role in that offense. But we also saw Likely got the touchdown in last playoff game. We've seen Dawson Knox actually running, playing more snaps, and I think running more routes than Dalton Kincaid. So those are the things that, when we know that we need tight ends to fill out our roster, worth kind of considering, because those are not nearly as relevant on Underdog when they just kind of blend in with the rest of the wide receivers. All right, we have the number 2 spot. Let's see what they start off with here for Benji Boy Brighton on the clock, whether they'll go Josh Allen, Lamar, Jalen. We've got some options. One thing I've noticed on DraftKings is QBs are not going in the first round or even second round as much as you do on Underdog. On Underdog, it feels like those 5 QBs, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Jared Goff, and Patrick Mahomes, are always gone by the end of the second round. Here, it gets a little more interesting. So I think there's a little more value to kind of going off the board and hoping that kind of the QB situation falls to you. So I think this will be a good example on this draft. We can try that. I don't love grabbing Lamar second because Henry often doesn't make it, and that's not great. You could go Jalen Hurts, but you also risk that the Saquon and the Barkley drafter end up just stacking together. We're going to go for some kind of a unique build here. I'm going Gibbs with the number 3. And the hopes here with Gibbs, I'm going Gibbs number 2. The hopes are that people don't want to draft Jared Goff that early. If we look at his ADP right now, Jared Goff is 13.5. And so depending on the draft room you're in, hey, ETR logo over here, maybe Otis for a lady ends up just saying, you know what, I'm going to go Amon-Ra and I'm going to go Goff. And that'd be a completely normal start. Literally what we did on Underdog. But when you look at the ADP, DJM goes the Amon-Ra, so he'll probably go with the Goff. And if he does, that's completely reasonable. But I think you have the ability to kind of take a bit more chances for those QBs falling on DraftKings. So I've seen some pretty crazy builds. Okay, so Otis for a lady over here goes to the Mahomes and Jefferson. DJ M goes with a Goff. Oh, and Jokers pulls out a Joker move and grabs Jalen Hurts to stack with Lamar. That means we are not going to have one of the top 5 QBs, and neither will be Mr. Grimm. So we will now be building a bit of a unique team. Detroit, we're going to play for them getting the bye. And then on the other side, we're going to need one of the long shots, maybe the Chargers, maybe the Steelers, to make it out. Okay, we have Derrick Henry. The other option is we could play for an NFC team like the Packers. We're not going to go Vikings because Jefferson's already gone, or the Bucks, or the Rams. I'm going to start with the Derrick Henry here. I think we're at least getting a fairly unique pairing with the Baltimore-Detroit. Now, obviously, if they make the Super Bowl, that unique pairing doesn't really help us with Baltimore-Detroit because we're not going to have a QB from it. But it could still help us advance in other rounds. Let's say conference championship. Those are the 2 guys that go off, even in a game that Detroit loses. And so when it be we build for a Bucks conference championship is Tampa versus Detroit. Gibbs goes off for 25, 30 points. Bucks actually win that game. And then they play the Ravens in the Super Bowl. Those are so I think Zay Flowers is a good one here. where it's, again, we're now playing for Baltimore making the Super Bowl in the AFC, and the NFC, we're going to come in with a Packers or Rams or Bucks, and it's not the worst. It's not the worst. So we'll grab the Zay Flowers. One thing of note here is if you need to kind of, as I mentioned, on the underdog side of things, if you're trying to stack a team, you can just type in like Lions or Ravens. We cannot do that here. So we kind of, I want to be a little more proactive to go through and just start starring the players from the teams I'm looking at so I don't miss out. So we got Mark Andrews there. Last one should be Bateman. Then let's see, likely with a little Justice Hill maybe. Oops. Nope, there's Justice Hill. And there's Isaiah Likely. Trying to think through. I think that's all the relevant Baltimore ones that would still be available. Maybe you could throw on a Nelson Aguilar or something at the very end. But now we're going to go back to... we're going to watch the draft board because what I'm watching for right now is really just, okay, Rams and Bucks, because those are the two options I really have. Other one could still be Packers. We still have Josh Jacobs on the board. Okay. Let's go with the Packers. Nice thing about Packers is once you get Josh Jacobs, all those other pass catchers are really further on in the draft. So what we're building for now is a Green Bay, Detroit. Honestly, the Detroit thing, we're not going to worry too much about. Green Bay, assuming Detroit gets the 1 seed, Green Bay's not the best partner because they would most likely play each other in the divisional round. But once the way things fell with the QBs and us getting some solid Baltimore, I do think it makes sense. Let's play for a Baltimore in the AFC, and who can we get in NFC? So now we'll start throwing a whole bunch of the Packers in the queue. Got the Jordan Love. Now let's grab all those. So let me think. And the nice thing is Mark Andrews. Did he already go? Mark Andrews went here. Okay. Obviously would have been nice. We need the tight end. We can still get a Sam Laporta later on, so I'm not too concerned about that. Like Jordan Love's ADP is 46.8. Rashad Bateman's 36. Yes, we're getting a little gamble by not taking Jordan Love. It's possible that Mr. Grimm decides that he's going to do, but he's got LAR, he's got Tampa. Hopefully he ends up going with far more of a Rams or a Bucks and not the Packers. That allows us to kind of strengthen our Baltimore side of things with the Rashad Bateman. Let me get some more Green Bay pass catchers in there. We've got Jaden Reed right there. We should be having Christian Watson, Tucker Kraft, Romeo Dobbs should be a close. Oh, past Romeo Dobbs there. There we go. Thank you. Let's get rid of Gainwell. All right, there's the Justice Hill. Yeah, sometimes it moves quick like that. Yep. All right, going back to the draft board. Again, as you're doing these drafts, it's very important to keep an eye on what others are doing in the drafts, because as the draft progresses, you need to think through where I may need to pivot, where I may need to adapt, as well as project what you think other relevant teams are doing. As we were saying with Mr. Grimm, we know that he doesn't have a QB, so at some point he's going to grab one, but he just grabbed Kyron to stack with Puka. He has that Evans. I wouldn't be shocked if he goes Bucky Irving here, and that sets up for him going Matthew Stafford and or Baker Mayfield. In that world, we're not competing against him, which we like. Jordan Love should come to us. If we look at Benji over here, Josh Allen, AJ Brown, Travis Kelce, Khalil Shakir, Isaiah Pacheco, a bit of a wonky draft because you grab the Josh Allen here and then investing so much in the Kansas City with 2 of your next 4 picks. But he does have the Khalil Shakir here. Hopefully he won't be taking a QB. I think if we really want to play it safe, we could take Jordan Love with the next. We'll probably take a look at what else we're competing against. We have the Q here. The Q, now keep in mind, does not have ADP. And while our ranks are helpful from an ETR to know like value-wise, to get a better idea of where we think they'll get drafted, we should be focusing on ADP. And so I still have the Jordan Love is just so important for this team, even though Jaden Reed and some of these wide receivers, ADPs might be 43.7. It's pretty close. Where's Tucker Kraft? 48.7. All right. I think we're going to take Jordan Love. Yeah. Okay. Mr. Grimm now looks like he's just trying to build out a monster team to advance out of this round. Like, this is going to be a very hard team to beat during the first round of the playoffs. And that's one of the things with DraftKings structure is only 1 out of 6 teams are advancing. And if you look, I mean, think about this from a DFS. Okay, back to us. Let's throw Jaden Reed as the top. I think we can still get some Tucker Kraft later on. No issues. But we look at what we're going to have to try to advance past Saquon Barkley, James Cook, Kyron Williams, Puka Nacua, Mike Evans, Nico Collins, Jaden Daniels. Now, I'm not familiar with Mr. Grimm. It is possible that Mr. Grimm is a very good playoff basketball player and in most drafts will normally do stacks and play for the Super Bowl. And in this world, once Jokers decided to go Jalen Hurts for his second QB instead of Mr. Grimm getting him, because I have a feeling Mr. Grimm probably would have grabbed Jalen Hurts and it would be a completely different draft. But it's very possible that once that happened, Mr. Grimm just says, you know what? I'm just going to try to get out of the first round here and draft the absolute best possible team. And in those scenarios, it's really difficult to be in the draft with that person because they are basically giving themselves a 0% chance of winning like the large prizes, which means the EV of their team is not that great. But their chance of advancing out of this pod is quite high, just given they have literally many of the best plays for this week. I don't think that means that we should change our strategy and just try to advance too. I think we still need to like lean in and be like, you know what? There's still, wonkiness. There's still outs for us to kind of, if we make it out of this, we've got a strong team, but no question, they are crushing their long-term high upside EV for winning to get that min cash. And as a result, all of us, our EV for just getting out of the pod is quite less. But we're going to continue to work with what we got. We don't have any tight ends. I'm probably going to go Tucker Kraft and Isaiah Likely back to back. Before I draft either, I want to see, is this person planning on drafting any of my Baltimore guy? I don't think so. So I shouldn't have an issue. I'll grab Tucker Kraft first, and then we should be able to get Isaiah Likely next. And yes, there are 12 rounds for this. As I mentioned earlier, with that extra tight end slot, there are now 6 players that you are starting each week: 1 QB, 1 running back, 2 wide receivers, 1 tight end, and 1 flex. I maybe could wait on Isaiah Likely, but I don't think anyone's really going to be fighting with me. Let's check Justice Hill. This is really last minute. All right, we're going to go Justice Hill. I think Justice Hill's ADP was 54. Likely's 48. All right, I made a rash decision. Would have rather gone with the Likely. But when I was looking at our team, we have the Derrick Henry. Yeah, okay. That was a mistake. Should have gone with the Isaiah Likely, given we don't have a tight end from there. And Mr. Grimm over here has 0 tight ends, so it's very possible he grabs Isaiah Likely. I think we hurt ourselves there. He's probably going to grab Isaiah Likely just from the highest ADP standpoint, just to help his advance. Maybe he goes Cade Otton. Maybe Zach Ertz. It's possible. He's got at least stacks with those, but we'll want to get Isaiah Likely if he can fall to us. We've got 2 more picks. Let's do a quick recap on where we are. From a running backs, Jahmyr Gibbs, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Justice Hill. Very strong running back. So strong that I didn't need to grab Justice Hill. Yep, there goes Isaiah Likely there. That was a faux pas. That was a mistake on our part. Kind of just rushed. I think in my mind, I was thinking underdog ADP, where Justice Hill has a higher ADP than Isaiah Likely, but because of the tight end importance over here, Isaiah Likely is higher. So hopefully Tucker Kraft can lead us to the promised land on this team for a Green Bay Baltimore Super Bowl. Might be worth us grabbing 1 more tight end just so we're not fully reliant upon just Tucker Kraft. But if you look at who's available, it's pretty rough. We'll see. From a just projection standpoint, I think Freiermuth is probably my favorite. He's actually been playing a pretty strong role in that offense recently. Double-digit points in 4 out of his last 5 out of the last 6, if you include that 9.9, which is almost there. But I don't love just grabbing a random one-off like that. Coming back to us, you see Mr. Grimco's 3 quarterbacks here. Just building an interesting build there. At least he's going to be hurting at tight end a bit. Grabs the Zach Ertz for the correlation with Jaden Daniels makes sense. We're back to us. We have 2 more Packers wide receivers we can grab. We have 3 more picks available. We don't need running backs. I don't think it's worth us grabbing a random QB. So Dobbs, Christian Watson, or we go with a tight end. I'm going to start with the Christian Watson, grab Romeo Dobbs next, and maybe then we can make a final decision on if we want to end it with one more just kind of one-off tight end. Then, the difference between a Freiermuth, a Dalton Schultz, like for the wild card round, isn't that high. I do like Cade Otton, but I don't even know if he's going to be healthy. So let's grab the Romeo Dobbs. We're really leaning into the Packers. And because it's going to be so hard to beat Mr. Grimm in this first round, we want to bring a lot of correlation. And so the way that we finish first out of 6 in this group is Jordan Love has just a monster game. Obviously, we need the Packers to win the first game because we need them to go to the Super Bowl for this team to have any true upside. And so if they're going to win the first game, we're hoping that they just put up, 40 plus points. Jordan Love, we've got his 3 pass catchers. We've got his 4 pass catchers, including Tucker Kraft. And we probably need a little luck from the other games. Josh Allen doesn't go off. Maybe lower scoring elsewhere. Maybe some weather concerns. I'm not sure. Green Bay. Decent chance Green Bay ends up playing Tampa, and we know that could very much be a shootout. That's probably kind of our best case scenario. If they play the Rams, we don't love it as much. At least it would be in a dome. Yeah, and so we'll finish it out. Probably we'll see what best tight end is available. And this is kind of the risks of, as I mentioned, of when you grab a non-QB early on, because you get, left out of those top 5. Obviously, we didn't expect this guy to go double, but honestly, I think even if he didn't, I think Mr. Grimm here was going to be grabbing Jalen Hurts. But I like to kind of try out these, especially on, particularly on DraftKings, because I have been able to, in this position, grab Gibbs, and then I've also gotten Amon-Ra, and I've gotten Jared Goff. And now you're getting a relatively very, very unique and very strong Detroit combo. And you consider that they're likely to get the bye. So if you can get that unique, which even only becomes more unique because so many of the Detroit teams will be eliminated in round 1 to the Super Bowl, that's where I'm looking for that upside. And we saw, the payouts, 25% of the entire prize pool. So that first place $500K. I want to get to the Super Bowl, and I want to get to the Super Bowl with a unique team. These are the ways to kind of do it rather than taking that Lamar, taking the Hurts. Now, a lot of times I will take the QB. I think, a lot of times it probably makes sense to do it, but I do want to mix in to my portfolio some of these higher upside plays as well. Okay, one more pick then coming back to us. I'm kind of leaning towards the Pat Freiermuth side of things. We don't really, there's still some up in the air about where, what Pittsburgh's going to be playing. There's a chance they play Baltimore, which wouldn't be ideal for us in the first round. But I'm looking at these others. Dalton Schultz, I just don't like anything nearly as much. So we'll take Freiermuth, give us a little extra support in the first round, and a chance that Pittsburgh ends up winning it. Fun draft there. Hopefully you kind of learned from, I'd say one definite mistake that I made with the Isaiah Likely. Definitely a bit wonky going off the board by not taking the QB early on. And, some things that you can kind of use in your drafts. This is such a fun game, and there's, a lot of mistakes that can be made. There's a lot of chances, risks that can be taken to try to get that high upside, unique play. I think the best kind of thing I can say is as you are playing, like try test different ones. See what works, see what doesn't, see what's really hard to get. Try to get a well-rounded portfolio of the various combos, the various teams that you think have a chance of making that run, and play for the best. And it's such a fun time of year. It's a fun sweat once the playoffs begin as well. So appreciate you watching, joining. You said ETR for rankings, for strategy articles, Best Ball Explorer for doing your analysis, the Solver Draft Assistant for helping you out on Underdog with those overlays to give you more information while you are drafting. Hope you all enjoyed it. Happy drafting.